create something that's sort of fun. When the world changes, you have to change with it.
Hello, this is Daniel Wolf with Vision Makers with Christina Bilovich, and we have the great pleasure of talking to my very good friend STUART LAWSON today. STUART has been living in Russia for most of the last 25 years and is really an exciting person for us to talk to today, because he has seen crises not only in Russia over the last 25 years, but all over the world. I'm not going to give you his full CV because it would take too long, but he's currently at Ernst & Young here. He's been working with them since 2011. He's been the CEO or chairman of many banks in Russia, including Citibank, including HSBC, Bank Soyuz, and is also a director of the Russo-British Chamber of Commerce and the Association of European Business. STUART is also a professor. He teaches a really interesting course called Successful Failure, that I've had the pleasure of answering questions at. Also spent 25 years at Citibank, during which he was sent to 11 different countries. And so, STUART, welcome.
Thanks.
STUART,
Thanks for the invite.
STUART, I gather Citi didn't send you to places because they were doing well. So, talk a little bit about your experience at Citibank, and what is the experience of going to a place where things are already not headed in the right direction?
Yeah, okay. Well, I think I probably should start with, why did I get into that business, as it were? And it wasn't something I volunteered for, and it wasn't something I ever thought I'd do. Basically, at the age of 28, Citibank assigned me to the quietest management job they thought they could find, which was corporate bank head in Kenya, a very stable country at the time. And off I went, actually at the age of 27, to run the corporate bank. And 1 year later, I woke up one night to find that we'd had a coup, that it was a full-on African coup. People were killed, airport was taken, this and that and the other. And what had been sort of a pastime almost in terms of my concentration on the job in hand, suddenly I had to pay attention. And I essentially became the crisis manager because there was a crisis and I happened to be the manager. It was a fascinating time because it really taught me the importance of, first of all, actually ensuring you personally are safe. Because if you are not safe yourself, then nothing else happens. Then the importance of communication, knowing where people are, knowing how to get to them. Because if you don't do that, you can't do the next thing, which is to make sure that people are safe and that you're able to give them support that you need. And then finally, to be able to then roll out support to your customers. And also alongside that, it also taught me how to manage remedial situations and to manage a damaged portfolio. And I guess Citibank noticed that, and so for the next 14 years, one way or another, they just sort of moved me around. And I ended up running what I would call crisis management. Sometimes it was external, sometimes it was internal because our management processes are broken. And that was in Egypt, Norway, and Italy. And the last one in Italy was 93 to 95 during Tangentopoli and all of the crisis across the whole of the Italian business sector. And I mean, this was fun because actually crisis management is fun if you like that sort of thing. It means you have to bring your A game, and we can talk a bit about what are some of the observations I've had in those different situations. But I think it's quite important to make a point here, which is the first crisis was one that appeared on my doorstep, and then from that point on, I only got put into my roles after the problem had happened. So when you look at my leadership style and what I did, I had a very directional, very authoritarian change management leadership style, and I had no goodwill from any previous period, because if I turned up in your business, it was never good news. And it basically meant that, you know, the guy before me had been removed. And of course, after one or two of these, my reputation preceded me. And there wasn't exactly a welcoming committee. But I always got the job done, but also Citibank took the view, and it was the right view, I think, which was not to keep me around. I came in to do a job, I did the job, and then I was moved on. So it's not, I mean, a lot of the lessons that I've taken out of this came later, because they only came, and you know, because you've talked to me about successful failure, but they only came after I reaped what I sowed, in terms of this very aggressive management style, which I think is necessary for the front end of a crisis, but which should not be maintained longer. That's so you know, my background in crisis management and across these different countries was very exciting. It gave me actually 11 countries, as you mentioned, because I also stopped in on staff positions between the crises. But it was a very specific type of experience, and really over the last I guess 20 years, I've needed to revisit a lot of the way that I was leading, and that's been very valuable.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and I think it's also very interesting that you came in after the problem was already there. It gave you a kind of probably a little bit advantage because you had no sentimental attachment. You didn't feel responsible for the mistakes. You were able to focus on just, you know, understanding why the mistakes had been made and what were the consequences, but not to be too sentimental or attached to the way things were before.
Yes, I mean, I think if we talk about you know, necessary things that you have to get on with in a crisis, what I always believe is actually the best crisis management is to understand the crisis is coming and to act before it arrives, because if you can do that, you have options open to you that once you're in the crisis are no longer available. So the best crisis management is to have tripwires out there that alert you to the fact that there's an oncoming crisis and allow you to maneuver. Once you're in the crisis, and of course right now we're in a crisis, once you're in a crisis, you still have room to maneuver, it's just less. But one of the principal messages I'd give is you can't delay. The thing I've noticed in my experiences of these crises is that people have a plan, and the plan is that they hope for the best. And then when that plan doesn't work, they have a backup plan, and that is to hope harder. And so there's this enormous inertia that people don't feel comfortable accepting the new reality. And that means that what you have to do is urgently analyze the situation, urgently take a view. Is it a V, a W, is it an L? You know, take a view on what the shape is, but most of all, put in place a series of actions that ensure that the organization starts moving. You know, when I give a lecture on this, I have a picture of a bunny rabbit in the headlights. Because that's basically what happens to organizations, is that it's outside their prior experience. Most people, you know, I was running HSBC in 2008. And so, you know, most of my lending officers had less than 10 years experience. So they hadn't been through 98, and they'd only seen, you know, very positive, benign environment. And so for them, a downside was 0% growth, you know. And there was a fundamental problem, because it challenged their view of the world to get them to say, okay, the world has changed, now we have to deal with a new reality. So right at the front end of everything that happens is the need to accept that historical inputs won't create historical outputs, and that the world is changing fast. So a decision postponed means that you're not taking action that could have really quite serious consequences. Of course, the balance here is you don't want to do knee-jerk reactions. So I'm not suggesting that you walk in and immediately do things without at least going through some basic analysis. Although having said that, there are some things that every business needs to do at the front end, which you have to do. So it's not a question of what do I need to know, it's you need to do this. And the first thing is liquidity is oxygen. It's not about value, it's not about profit and loss, it's about how much cash you have. And so it doesn't matter what the shape is of the crisis. The first thing you need to know is how much cash do you have, how much cash can you generate, can you draw down lines of credit, how much leeway you have with your customers and your suppliers to create a cash cushion. Because obviously, one of my strong recommendations always is draw down your short-term lines with the banks, because then they can't use material adverse change to tell you can't have it. And once you've got it, then they have to get it back. I'm a gamekeeper turned poacher turned gamekeeper, so that's my strong advice. But if you do it with the suppliers and customers, it has an impact on your business, on your ongoing relationship with them. Of course, it does with the banks as well. But I think you've got to be a little more careful how you manage that. And but first of all, before you do anything else, is how much do you have? How much do you need? What's your cash burn rate? And these are going to be things that no matter what else turns up, that's a priority.
It's an interesting story about HSBC in the crisis of 2008. One of the questions that Christine and I were talking about in advance of our conversation is, for many people, these kinds of dislocations and what we're going through now, in addition to the challenges for businesses and liquidity, there are emotional aspects to this. How do you handle these yourselves, and how do you help people on your team handle the fact that there's a huge emotional aspect for many people? When things change rapidly, the reaction is to compress and hide and disappear.
Yeah, good question. Well, again, I guess I was fortunate in a way because I had this very, very radical crisis situation imposed on me when I was young. I guess I didn't know I had it in me. There was nothing in my background that would ever have suggested that I could manage a bank during a coup. But it wasn't something that you learned in the center of London, But the fact was that I discovered in myself that actually for me, the game, as it were, the focus on getting the reaction right, on having a plan and executing the plan, it basically allowed me to focus a lot of my energy just on getting that job done. And if the bullets were flying, well, that's what was going on in the background. It wasn't the thing that worried me. The thing that worried me was, did I have a plan and how could I execute it? I think let's talk about this. We're all home working and everybody's kind of locked in. And I actually think that there's a health issue here, but there's a far greater psychological issue. And also, I'm afraid that when this thing is over and they count the casualties, I think a lot of those casualties will be with people who have not been able to come up with a way of managing it. So first of all, you've got to stay healthy. If you're not healthy, nothing else works. So, if you're in lockdown, you're in lockdown. You do everything that you're meant to do so that you stay as healthy as you possibly can be. And secondly, and this of course is not from an athlete, you've got to at least put in place some physical activity every day and make it on a scheduled time. I think this thing of getting up in the morning, going through your normal routine, getting dressed. Okay, so none of us are wearing suit trousers. We all know that. The fact is that at least you got the top bit that looks as though you're being professional about the day, and you really need to keep that sort of schedule going, because it stops you going into this sort of dark pit where you're in your pajamas all day and it doesn't matter what you do, and then that's very psychologically damaging. I think the next thing I'd say is, and I think this is important anyway in business, but an advisory board, well, I call it an advisory board, but it's to have a network of people that you talk to regularly that keep you sane. And it's a two-way process. I mean, I think there's a danger here that people think, oh, I know what, I'll call my friends up and I'll just download and then I'll hang up. Well, that isn't what I'm suggesting, because if you do it in a one-way direction, pretty soon you'll find that people don't pick up. The objective is to actually create a support network for your friends. So what you're doing is you're supporting each other. And my recommendation also is to make sure, and by the way, this is anyway, to make sure that your support network is outside your business, both in terms of your organization and in terms of the people that you know. And Dan, you know that I'm very keen to have outside interests, and I spend a lot of time on photography and trying to get to know people outside my normal business environment. And the final thing I'd say, there's so this is what I'm doing, but obviously everybody should go at it a different way, is to create something that's sort of fun. So you're doing something that lets off the pressure, that gives you something creative to do. So for me, I've created crazy home diaries on Instagram, and every day I come up with a different scenario, maybe target practice with my banana. Last night we were barbecuing marshmallows on a picnic in front of a roaring fire. So every day and of course we're at day 29 now, so I've had 29 of these photos. As it goes on, it's going to become more and more challenging, but my objective is to try and make it more and more surreal. So expect Stuart surfing, and other such classics.